today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
how unclear rules and invisible agreements can quietly strangle your partnership. Silent contracts are expectations that are never stated, or they're understandings that work in the short run. When roles are loosely defined, this is a setup for silent contracts. When one partner has greater emotional awareness than the other, that can be a setup. Make all expectations explicit. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about unspoken expectations and silent contracts and what they do to marriages/partnerships. It is popular wisdom that unexpressed expectations or expectations that haven't been agreed on are a recipe for a disaster in any environment. And this is especially true when you're married, and even more true if you're married and working together, or maybe you're in a partnership in a business where you have unspoken expectations and there are silent contracts. Silent contracts are things that you've unconsciously agreed to, that when they change, one person feels violated or both people feel violated. Not unusual, extraordinarily destructive. Maurice says, my wife and I run a business together. Hey, I want to be really clear, folks. If you don't run a business together, this is still going to apply to you. So Maurice says, my wife and I run a business together. She's a more detail-oriented and emotionally attuned person. She's plugged into the team. And I'm more of a big picture, execution-focused guy. Recently, she's been frustrated because I didn't follow up on an employee issue she noticed early on. She says, I should have anticipated it. I assumed she was handling it. Are we expecting too much from each other? Well, Maurice, it might not be that you're expecting too much from each other. It might be that you're not articulating your expectations, or it might be that your expectations are shifting and changing and only you know for sure. But let's talk about this big picture so everybody gets it, right? In any relationship or any partnership, right? When people get married, it's a partnership. And when they have children, the responsibility for that partnership expands, right? Just like when two people are partners in business, they start out, maybe they're two attorneys who become partners, and then they get employees, right? That partnership expands. And as the partnership expands, responsibilities expand. And when roles, we talked about this last episode, are not clearly delineated, who holds responsibility for what? Where is the buck actually going to stop? That's when the problems come up. I'll give you an example. My wife and I, there's this card game for couples that I've forgotten the name of. Sorry. I'll share it another time, which has all or almost all the possible things that two people might manage with children and without children. And we spread them out, and each one of us took a card that we felt we completely owned. And there were about a dozen cards in the middle that neither of us were willing to completely own. And we realized that those dozen cards were where we were having the biggest fights. If the garbage wasn't taken out, I was mad at her, she was mad at me. Now, look, we all know the guy's supposed to take the garbage out. So I ended up taking that card. And it doesn't mean that I'm supposed to take the garbage out, by the way. It means I'm supposed to make sure the garbage gets taken out. It might mean that it's my job to delegate that to an employee like my son or my daughter. But the point is that unless somebody actually owns it, delegation is less likely to happen and blame is a more likely outcome. Second, when does awareness become responsibility? All right. So let's go back to the example of my wife. We're both aware the garbage needs to be taken out. Does that mean we're responsible? Or if you're running a business together and an employee isn't doing their job and you haven't decided yet who's responsible for that employee, like in the case of Maurice, there's something with the team that he wasn't handling, he wasn't following up. His wife expected him to take care of it. He probably assumed she's a detail person. She's got this. She probably thought it was a big picture problem. It hadn't really been decided who owned it. They were both aware of it. Or maybe she was aware of it and he wasn't. Does awareness create responsibility? Our strengths being mistaken for obligation, right? Maurice is the big picture guy. She's the detail person. Problem with the employee. Oh, it's a detail problem. No. It's impacting the whole company. It's a big picture problem. There's an assumption that because you're strong in something and the problem is in that area, it's yours. Or if you're talking about two people living at home, feeding the children, you agreed to feed the children and you bought something they don't like to eat. Did you meet the expectation or not? Are we unconsciously expecting men and women to think the same way or to compensate for each other's differences without saying so? That's really interesting, right? Men and women are equal. They should do all the same jobs. I'm going to tell you though, if there's a strange sound in our house at night, guess who's expected to go check it out? It's me. Or if there's a problem with the children, guess who's expected to manage it for right or wrong? My wife. Because there are strengths she has emotionally that I don't, and there's strengths that I have that she doesn't. But that expectation shouldn't mean that it's always that way. In fact, it is my responsibility to interact with the children as much as hers and interact from my strengths, not from hers. And it might be that if there's a strange sound in the house, she should be sitting there with her phone ready in case a gun goes off or I start screaming and yelling or whatever. Because typically when I'm sent off to investigate the sound, she goes back to sleep, right? Well, if I get stabbed and don't make a noise, that's not going to work out for her. You feeling where I'm coming from here? Assuming that someone's strong in an area and that they have it doesn't mean we shouldn't be watching, looking, and making sure, because sometimes people drop the ball. Sometimes the unexpected happens. Brad and Gwen, you know Brad and Gwen, my favorite clients. That's all of my clients named Brad and Gwen. They thought they divided their responsibilities clearly. Brad handled vision, strategy, and execution. Sounds kind of like Maurice. Gwen handled the people, the culture, and the day-to-day dynamics. But in practice, the lines were a little blurred. Another way to put this is if you were married, Brad handled taking care of the house and the car and the property, while Gwen handled the social relationships and a lot of the things to do with the children's friends. Brad might have handled discipline and teaching the children things. You see how that works? They had a clear delineation. But somehow, the lines got blurred. Gwen noticed early stages of tension with an employee. She assumed Brad would step in once it crossed a certain threshold because that's what a leader does. Brad assumed Gwen would handle it because that's her domain. When the issue escalated, Gwen felt abandoned, and Brad was totally blindsided. Gwen said, I shouldn't have to explain this. It's obvious. Brad said, I didn't know I was responsible for that. But it was your thing. Neither of them was wrong, all right? Because when it came to this particular issue, it hadn't been articulated. Let's take it down to a family level. Maybe it's not a business. Maybe it's a family. Maybe their son staying out past curfew with people they know they've told him not to spend time with because they consider them to be bad elements. Who should handle that? Does Brad think that Gwen should handle that because that's her job is to handle the children? Or does Gwen think Brad should handle that because it's the son and because there's a principle that needs to be taught? Or maybe both of them should be handling it together in different ways. The truth is that sometimes we have expectations and we get siloed in our strengths and siloed in our expectations. And we think because that person should be responsible, we don't talk to them about it. And part of the problem that Brad and Gwen are having, and Maurice, part of the problem that you and your partner are having is you are not talking about your silos and your areas of overlap. You're not talking about the big picture and the details enough. And I'm not saying that we need to be talking about every detail. Hey, guess what? I cut the dog's nails today. I hope that that's okay. I'm not talking about micromanaging, but I am talking about, all right, how are the kids doing today? Or, Maurice, in your case, what's going on with the employees? There should be weekly discussion between two partners of how the people that they're responsible for are doing, to the point where, hey, there's a problem here with this person. Whether it be a child or an employee, there's a problem. I'm not saying employees are children. I'm just making this clear for everyone who's listening, those who have businesses and those who don't. Whether it's a child or an employee, when a problem comes up, that's something for both people to talk about. If it's a small problem, no. If it's a big problem, yes. Or if it's a small problem that's escalating, yes. You see what I'm saying? So the truth is that Brad and Gwen were operating from different silent contracts. So they had a silent contract. The silent contract is you handle your silo, I'll handle mine. It's almost a form of parallel parenting. And I think that a lot of marriages are destroyed by this kind of silence. And the way that it happens is two people get together, they fall in love, they start something together, maybe they start a family together, maybe they start a business together too. Maybe they're in business together, they get married and start a family. Who knows? But as things get more and more complicated, they're trying to spin more and more plates. The tendency is like, you go spin those plates and I'll spin these plates because I'm good at this kind of plate, you're good at that kind of plate. And there is no talk about, all right, what do I do if you get sick? How am I going to spin your plates for you? Or what are you going to do if I lose interest in this and take up a new interest? Or what are we going to do if I hire someone to do these plays for me and I go spend some other plays? There's no talk about that. Or what are we going to do if we get divorced? I'm working with a Brad and Gwen right now who are in the process of getting divorced, and they're having trouble deciding how to parent together because there's some problems with the children and they're not sure how to do what's best for the children in this case. And they've got other people. They're talking about it, by the way. They're talking to me. They're talking to each other through me. They're talking to third parties. But when you're not talking about it and you go off, that's when the problems start. And that's what we're talking about here with Brad and Gwen and Maurice. This is for you too. Silent contracts are expectations that are never stated, or they're understandings that work in the short run, right? In the case of parents, you know what? I'm really good at taking the kids to sports. You're really good at feeding them. You handle feeding them. I'll take them to sports. But then things change. I can't take them to sports and no one ever talks about how to handle that. Or I can't feed them because I've got something else. They don't talk about it. And the kids start slipping between the cracks and people get frustrated and angry. The silent contract hasn't been made explicit through talking about it. When roles are loosely defined, this is a setup for silent contracts. When one partner has greater emotional awareness than the other, all right, that can be a setup. When one partner has greater strategic focus than the other, that can be a setup because we tend to lean into the strengths. I'll share something personal. One of my own children is complaining that my wife manages whole areas of our life that my wife is stronger in, without acknowledging that I manage other areas. It's normal and natural for us to manage where our strengths are. And sometimes the outcome of that doesn't seem fair to other people. And when those areas of strength are not explicit, that's where problems happen. That's where assumptions happen that we pay for later on. When we make gendered assumptions, oh, well, men are better at this and women are better at that. That's when things slip between the cracks. Because the truth are, there are exceptions to every gendered assumption. I'll give you one right now. As men go, I'm very emotionally aware and very aware of other people's emotions. And I read micro expressions and body language incredibly well for a man. I read them better than some women do. Because the truth is, on the scale of men strengths and women's strengths, there's a lot of overlap because there are exceptions. And my wife is an incredibly linear woman. I often mock her for it. She's very goal-oriented. She's had to be to compete in a male-dominated society. I mock her gently, not derisively, in a loving way. I say to her, wait a minute, I'm the one who's supposed to be doing that, don't you know? I'm the man. And we laugh about it. The truth is, gender strengths happen in a range, and if you're of a certain gender and you work at growing the strengths of the other gender within yourself, and I encourage both genders to do this, women are way ahead of men in this way, then you can close that gap and increase synergy. It's particularly important for men in 2025 to work on identifying feelings and becoming emotionally fluent. All right, but that's a rabbit hole. That's a whole nother podcast. I did an episode on that. Look it up. So I want to be really clear. It isn't that we're expecting too much. It's that we're expecting it without being explicit. We're expecting it silently. It might be that by mutual unconscious agreement, we've expected it silently. It might be that we felt so overwhelmed that when we both jumped in and took responsibility for certain areas, we just assumed it would be that way forever, and then things changed. And one gets upset with the other, or both get upset with each other, which is often the case. I work with a lot of Brad and Gwens who go through that. So speaking of Brad and Gwen they put a new plate that they were both spinning. There was a plate they were both spinning. It was the better partner plate. It was the prosperous partner sorry. It was the prosperous partner plate, and they both had responsibility for spinning it. It's a big plate, the prosperous partner plate. It takes two people to spin it. One person can't spin it on their own for very long. They get exhausted. And part of spinning that plate was first clarifying their ownership in their areas of work and life. So you remember that thing where I told you about where my wife and I had 12 areas that nobody was owning? They owned. Made sure it was divided evenly and in ways that they both had responsibility for things they knew they could be good at. They might not like at it, but they knew they'd get it done because of who they were and how they were wired. They named handoff points for future situations. Gwen's emotional intuition became input, not obligation. Brad's leadership qualities became ownership, but not assumption. What that meant was there were times when Brad's intuition needed to be leaned into, and there were times when Gwen's leadership needed to be leaned into. They stopped gender swapping expectations. Brad stopped assuming that every emotional discord was going to be handled by Gwen. Brad learned to name his emotions. He learned to express them. He learned to help his employees do that in a way that was responsible too, because he realized that emotional intelligence, or emotional fluency, as we like to talk about it here, is a vital part of any culture. Your family or your business, being emotionally fluent in a way that's responsible without being blamey is vital. People need to have the ability to express what they're feeling in a way that's responsible so that others understand what's going on with them in any ecology. There was an adage that we taught them, and I want you to take home. Take this home. This is money in the bank for your prosperous partnership. Make all expectations explicit, even the totally unreasonable ones. The totally unreasonable ones that the other person is never going to comply with. You have to at least air it out. I have an expectation that you are going to meet all my needs all the time, that you're going to set other people aside for me, whatever it is, however crazy it is. Express it and say, I know this is crazy, but I'm airing it out because sometimes it comes up for me. Sometimes I get jealous because I have this expectation. It will help your relationship in so many ways. Gwen stopped saying, I feel disappointed all the time. Brad said, I finally know how to succeed with Gwen. I finally know how to get there. Maurice, I hope you're listening, buddy. This is your question we're answering here. So let's summarize this. Most destructive conflict in partnerships, in marriage, most destructive conflict is the result of silent agreements that are made just to get things done, unexpressed expectations, a lack of being explicit. Sometimes they're unreasonable expectations, but they need to be made explicit. Right? If you want to step out of destructive conflict, we need to step out of unreasonable expectations. I have an expectation that you're going to do this perfectly. Why can't you do this perfectly? Or a better way to put it would be, sometimes I have an expectation of myself and you, Brad, that you're going to do this perfectly. And I want you to know, here, I know that's unreasonable, but it's this little voice inside of me, and I want you to know I'm working on it. And sometimes I may talk from that little voice, and I invite you to point it out in a loving way, that maybe I'm being a little hypercritical or overly perfectionistic. That would be like one way to bring out the unreasonable. It's an example. It's not the only one. There's lots of them. I'm sure if you look inside your heart, you'll find others. When expectations or contracts are not explicit, when they stay silent, frustration builds. Disappointment increases. You get more and more, somebody described it to me as the death of 1,000 cuts. Sometimes death of 1,000 cuts is 1,000 criticisms, but sometimes it's just 1,000 disappointments, 1,000 unfulfilled frustrations. And what happens then? What we know about intimacy is that intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety, and safety requires trust, and trust requires caring communication. And so intimacy and vulnerability and trust erode under the force of the death of 1,000 cuts until that last one comes the straw that breaks the camel's back and ends it all. Prosperous partnerships, they don't require that everything stays the same. In fact, a prosperous partnership will not prosper if everything stays the same. What they require is, as things change, the situation, the circumstances, and both partners adjust to the changing situation, renegotiating silent contracts or even spoken contracts is vital. Renegotiating expectations is vital. In fact, I would argue if you want a prosperous partnership, I would argue if you're building a prosperous partnership, if the two of you are spinning that huge plate of partnership, part of what keeps it filling is having a place where you are going that you both agree on. And by definition, things have to change for you to get there. If you are in point A and you want to get to point D, a lot of change is going to happen for you to get to point B, C, and then D. Caring communication is the root of this. Hey, if you want tools for caring communication, for responsibly communicating emotion, go to richinrelationship.com, RICHINRELATIONSHIP.com, and join our free relationship membership group, The Bridge. And there's some tools there that come with that membership to help you communicate. And also, if you like what we're laying down here, if it's helping you or you think it's going to help other people, subscribe, like it, share it with other people. Please help us grow. Make Rich in Relationship a movement. Because notice, we don't have any ads here. The day may come where we have ads. But we don't have any ads here. This is a personal mission to help 10,000 marriages to prosper and grow, so that children grow up in a safe environment where they can be their fullest and best selves and fulfill their personal sense of purpose and mission. All right, so next episode, we're going to talk about when stress takes the wheel. So stay tuned. In the meantime, have a fantastic day and an amazing tomorrow.